Welcome to Rhythm, a podcast on being in balance through conversations with the Swami. Namaste Rhythm listeners and Namaste Swamiji, how are you?
Namaste Sunil, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good to see you again.
Yes, thank you.
Swamiji, this week I was hoping we could talk about a question we've had from one of the listeners, and this is on karma, but different perspectives on the karma, and possibly this discussion would be on trying to get a better understanding so that these two perspectives can be reconciled. So I'll ask you the question. The question's on karma, and the first perspective that we've talked about over many episodes is that karma has actions, and the actions have a result, which comes to the person that created the action in the first place. So, we've talked about there's a karma, there's a record being created, or debits and credits, and in the end, if the debit or credit is a balance, it has to be worked out in your next life and the cycle of birth and so on. That comes across. That's the first perspective, which is on karma and the actions that have a result and they're accumulated. The second perspective is, and this is, we've discussed this, but this comes from the Bhagavad Gita, right? So you've got the Bhagavad Gita a few times where you say, Sri Krishna has told us that we are merely instruments and that we are not the doers, we're just the instruments, and the doer is the Supreme One, the God or a higher being that's doing all the doing, and we're just merely puppets, right? So that's another view on karma, right? So these two perspectives seem to be at odds with each other. And therefore, I thought today's discussion, we could focus on these two different perspectives and look at how we can actually reconcile this.
Yeah, this is a question that is asked in different ways, Sunil, and sometimes the question is in the form of, do we have free will? Okay, really, do we have free will? Apparently, we all feel that we have a free will, that, you're talking now and I'm talking, the question, what you will say next moment, you think you're choosing. But, and that's the perception of most people. But there is this other view that really there's no free will really, that we are only instruments or puppets in the hands of some other being or some other power that works through us. So how to reconcile that? Okay, so let's start. The first view, that every action has a reaction, every work has a result, and good brings good and bad brings suffering to us. That particular perception is as a result of what we call spiritual ignorance. Spiritual ignorance about that higher entity that sits above us. So most of us have our self-identity as an I sense, an ego, an individuality, a personality that has got a mind and emotion, mental space where emotions, ideas, thoughts, knowledge, views, perspective, perceptions, all those things are there. And then, so you say, I am so and so, and you identified yourself with the mind. A doctor, I'm a teacher, I'm an engineer, something like that. And then it goes down to a next grosser level where it becomes identified with the body. And you said, I'm black, brown, white, male, female, or any gender. And so this capsule of body and mind with its own individual I sense, thinking that it is an independent entity on its own, is what we experience, most of us experience. In the light of the highest realization, they will say, no, that you are holding on to that, but it is not the enlightened understanding. Actually, you are spiritually ignorant about it. Something else. You are much more than that. And so they bring another dimension and said, we are essentially a spiritual being having a human experience. That means there's something that sits above the ego also. And And when it is seen from that higher perspective, then you get that second, the higher framework. Then you get the second perspective that, oh, the ego and the body mind is really an instrument in the hands of that higher power, that we are all different waves. And if we are not aware of the ocean, then that is our ignorance. But really, the wave cannot exist independent of the ocean. Actually, it has come out of the ocean, is made of the same substance, water as the ocean, and it will eventually go back into the ocean. The ocean can exist without the waves, but not vice versa. And it is that ocean that is the underlying common factor that joins everything, the unity behind all the diversity. So just to look at the surface of the ocean and say there are all so many waves and I'm not aware of the ocean is what is called spiritual ignorance, so to say. Where we are independent, separate beings, and where do we come from, we do not know. Where we go, we do not know. Why we are here, we do not know. But somehow we have a sense of individuality, personality. We go around doing our activities, duties, responsibilities without that awareness of that underlying unity. So when Arjuna is in the battlefield, that's a good example, then he suffers from this illusion where he is the great doer. He is the great warrior. He is desirous of fighting, and how well he fights will determine the outcome of the war. And so, and therefore, if he kills many people, then sin will come to him, and so much harm will come to others, and all that. And if he, in that way, when he thinks, then suddenly he doesn't see the rationale behind doing something so heinous, so which will cause so much suffering to him. So he suffered under that illusion that he is the doer, and that all these beings are human beings and they'll be killed, and he'll be responsible for that. So immediately in chapter 2, Sri Krishna brings him, introduces to him the concept of the higher framework about the spiritual dimension of us, the one universal being who is a substratum of all beings, which itself is eternal, it is immortal, which does not die, and all those qualities of the Atman is introduced. That totally transforms the whole picture. And then Sri Krishna is saying, go and fight the battle. Don't run away from it. But first you must be established in this wisdom of the Atman nature, the spiritual nature. It's called Sthita Prajna. Let your knowledge or your wisdom be established, be steady in this knowledge. Only then you can go and discharge this duty. So long we are ignorant about that spiritual dimension, we will have a sense of doership and enjoyership. It's called kartritva abhimana, I am the doer, bhoktritva abhimana, I am the enjoyer. Both of them come not out of knowledge but out of ignorance. And the doership ties itself. So when I say I am the doer, then I tie myself to the result of the work also, karma phala. So if I say I'm the doer and some good thing comes, then I take the credit and enjoy the success of it. And if the desired result is not achieved, then I think I failed and I take the blame of it or feel bad about it. But really, and therefore that's the state of most people, to languish in this, in ignorance and carry on work, we'll just continue that cycle, because in ignorance, if you identify with the result of work, then the result will come to us. But Sri Krishna says you can still be engaged in work, do all the duty, and not let the result bind you. And what is the method? Bring in that light of Vedantic knowledge that we are only an instrument in the hands of the divine. And Sri Krishna says, ahamkara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. A deluded person, vimudha atma, has got this ahamkar, that egotistic feeling, that karta aham, I am the doer, iti manyate, he thinks in this way. So I am the doer, that is the cause of all problems. And if one continues in that, then in the pendulum will swing and you'll have good times and then you'll have difficult times also, and you'll get whacked around this way and that way. But there's a more advanced or intelligent way of working, a spiritual way of working, where we bring in that perspective of the ocean behind the wave, the Supreme Being as the source of the power that flows through us, in which we are an instrument, nimitta matram, being only an instrument. Bhava Savya Sachin, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna. Okay, so what does that look like? How do I
So you
understand? Yeah.
just trying to understand what you said so far. The higher level of understanding is the Bhagavad Gita level, which is saying that we are the instrument, not the doer. There's no I. But the other understanding of karma is still one step up level understanding, right? Then having no understanding. So is there levels of understanding? So, if we say the Bhagavad Gita level is the topmost level, then the karma is some level of understanding, but it's not the highest level, because the karma. Some people don't even understand karma, right? So they just go about the merry way of doing things. But others would understand karma. They would go, right, well, I shouldn't do anything bad, because if I do anything bad, bad will come. So that's one level up than the other person.
Yeah.
And then the final could be other sages, I'm not sure, but the ultimate understanding is that I'm not the doer. I'm only an instrument. Would you say that that's the right way of looking at
Yes.
it so far?
Yes, the degrees of understanding,
Yeah.
as the mind becomes subtler, I will be able to grasp those truths, the multiple dimensions of things. It's like ice has got another form called water, and it can have another form called water vapor, which is now invisible, but I know it's in the atmosphere, it's there, and it can again be even finer than that in terms of oxygen and hydrogen in there. So same thing can have many, many subtleties, so to say.
Yeah.
The grosser one is an animal is working. It doesn't have a sense of really that ego, it's just instinctive. He eats and drinks and sleeps, and there's no sense of maybe right and wrong and this and that, maybe, I do not know. Maybe it's not so developed in there. But a human being has got this, the buddhi, the intellect, power of discrimination, where he says, oh, this is right, this is God, wrong and all that. But he has a strong sense of agency. They say that when one is born in a animal form, that is mostly to work out karma. They don't fabricate new karma, because the doership is not really there. It is only when the doership comes that we tie ourselves to the result of the karma. It's not that the result will not come. Okay, result will be there, but do you appropriate to yourself the agency and say the result is mine? That will happen only when we are ignorant to assume the doership. But a more enlightened understanding, which is what Bhagavad Gita is trying to teach to us, Sri Krishna is trying to teach humanity through this battlefield, and Arjuna as just the means for us. There's a more smart, intelligent, enlightened way of doing work. And then when we study the Bhagavad Gita, we bring that next dimension in us, around us, and behind the whole everything, that we are only little waves. Ultimately, they all exist. All these names and forms that people appear and disappear really come out of that infinite consciousness, which is this universal being. And actually, it is the power of the ocean that is flowing through all these layers and manifests as human action. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says God acts through the will of man. Okay, but man does not know that he's working there, so he appropriates that will to himself, and he says, I have free will. But really, that free will is a misnomer. That free will belongs at that higher spiritual level. But when we drag it down to the body-mind level, then it is not really a free will. So when we reflect on ourselves, how we are constituted, and we go through this framework that we have been talking right from the beginning of this podcast series, that We got this physical body, we got the mental body, and we have got this causal, the intellect, body of intelligence. And there is something beyond there, that bodiless, so to say, nameless and formless, but itself is the source out of everything. And we are constituted, the total picture of who we are is that. That universal powerhouse, which we call God or Brahman or the divine cosmic power or Parashakti, the supreme cosmic energy. She is the actual doer, creator, preserver, and destroyer, or resolving everything back to herself. That power actually is the ultimate doer. So that's called Parashakti. That Shakti is an energy that flows down from that higher frequency or higher subtle level through successive layers into this gross world. So visualize yourself that, I have got these three layers of my being. The grossest is the physical, the subtler is the mental, and then there's intelligence, but behind that is the ocean. And the activity really starts from there. The impulse actually comes from there. When it comes into that intelligence level, first layer, so to say, then it is called Ichcha Shakti. It is picked up as I will do something. Okay, I wish, I will do that. I'll get up, I'll have a bath, I'll take breakfast, I will drive to work. There's a will behind every action, if you reflect. And when we are not aware of that higher level, then we appropriate that will to that ego. And the ego says, I'm willing it. That is not the enlightened way of understanding. That is out of ignorance, avidya. Out of that avidya comes what is called asmita, I am, the ego sense. And then when it does something, it has got, it likes certain things, raga, or it does not like certain things, dvesha. So in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it's explained that out of that ignorance, avidya, comes that I sense, asmita, and that I sense has likes and dislikes, raga and dvesha, and it clings to this body-mind complex that it should not disintegrate, one does not die. So this capsule is bound now, body-mind complex with the ego. It's not aware of that foundation out of which everything is there. So now, if I explain it this way and you reflect, you will see that, yes, then a willpower comes, and that's the subtle will. Out of where it comes, I do not know, but it just pops up in your mind. And then it flows down a little lower into the mind space, and that translates into what is called Jnana Shakti. So Ichcha Shakti becomes Jnana Shakti. And in there you understand the method of doing some things. For example, a wish comes that I will have a cup of tea. Then do you know how to make a cup of tea? Okay. In your Jnana Shakti, in the mind space, because you have learned, maybe you do not know, you go onto YouTube, or you want to make a cake or cook some other dish, you have a desire for that, but you do not know, so you will go and get that knowledge by watching a video or something like that. And when you have got that, then you said, oh, I know how to do this. Yeah. So that is called Jnana Shakti. And then it becomes more materialized at a physical level, and that is called Kriya Shakti. Action is happening. So these three flows, we are aware of a little bit of that Ichcha Shakti. We are aware of that more about what's happening in the mind space about Jnana Shakti, and some of that will translate into action, Kriya Shakti. What Sri Krishna is trying to tell that, look, that Ichcha Shakti does not pop out of nowhere. It comes out of that higher source, which is the supreme being, or our higher self. That being is not somebody else. Actually, it's our own higher self. But it's not a product of the ego. Actually, the energy flows from that supreme level through these intervening stages until it manifests in this physical action. Now, the ego that is identified with this body-mind complex, if it is enlightened, he is aware where the source came from. And he says, okay, I am just a channel through which that power flowed, and the result really belongs to that. Because if that was not there, then this body will not move, the mind will not think, and the ego will also disappear, type of thing. So really I cannot and I should not in truth appropriate to myself the result of that action, because truly I am not the doer. The doer is the divine. So a person who has got that conviction and that deep understanding will try to put that perspective in the everyday life and remind oneself that I'm only an instrument in the hands of the divine, and have that spirit of surrender. The ego then now is not appropriating itself. The doership says, and I'll do my best, or let the divine walk through me as it wishes. Good comes good, bad comes bad. It is totally detached from the result of work because it knows that it is not the doer. In an actual realization, a realized person in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, he says, what is the sign of that somebody has realized God or has self-realized? There is, he says that person is absolutely convinced, not intellectually, but out of experience, that God alone is the doer, or that cosmic power that's behind the universe alone is a real doer. In ignorance, people say they are doer and therefore they suffer. Suffering comes when we appropriate to ourselves that agency. And if you want to have it truly detached, just be an instrument like a pen. Somebody lifts it up and writes. If it's a beautiful writing, the pen doesn't feel very happy. If it's a miserable, terrible writing, he doesn't feel very bad. It just lets the ink flow. That's its role. And the writer actually takes the credit. So ultimately, from the spiritual, when you're enlightened, realize that that would be the perspective. And then, in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says a person who is in that state, he is totally detached from the consequences of work, do not touch him.
But it's hard to get to that state, right? Because
Of course, it is
otherwise,
not easy.
otherwise,
Otherwise, Sunil, if that was so easy, then you have enlightened yogis walking down the street everywhere. But
yes,
that's ideal. You
yes,
see,
that's the ideal. Yeah,
that's
you got to
ideal.
strive
At
for the
least,
ideal, right? Yeah.
yeah. So at least, you have seen how it is, what is to work without that ideal and what are the
Mm.
consequences. All right. And now that you have come across the Vedanta knowledge and all those things, you said, hey, let me apply this and see how do I go back to my work and do things. Do I do it better? And, does it affect us? Does it, it's not the work is bad. It's how we are affected by it. That's, I think there is a problem, isn't it?
Yes,
So
yes.
here we can be in the midst of the battlefield of work, take up most challenging, difficult duties and responsibilities, and yet be totally detached from it because we are convinced on that idea that we are only an instrument. How does it happen? Just by studying the Vedanta philosophy and intellectualizing it, will it happen? No, no, no. That's just a starting point. We'll have to keep on practicing and practicing and practicing. Ultimately, it's like little baby is crawling, trying to take any support that is there to stand up, maybe some furniture or the wall or the parents' legs or something. Slowly takes the first steps, falls few times, and ultimately it can, stagger and walk, and later on it can run and do all those things. So we are like those spiritual babies. So when it comes to practicing this, and we take whatever support is there, but at the end of the day, just like the baby will one day grow up and run, we also will become spiritual athletes and be standing on our spiritual feet. But there's a process, and it constantly makes efforts. It doesn't know what failure is. It doesn't give up, no matter how many times it falls. And ultimately, it stands on its own feet. We have done that. Now, this is doing it in a spiritual way. So, not to be
Mm.
deterred by any failures. What else you can do? Otherwise, we'll be reconciled to crawling whole life.
Yeah,
That's no good.
yeah. What if people go, well, now that I know that I'm not the doer, therefore I can do anything, i.e., do things that they normally wouldn't do because now they can use that as an excuse
Yeah.
to do bad things, right? So how does that work?
Nah, you can't hoodwink the truth. You'll be
Yes.
just cheating yourself, fooling yourself. That is actually a when you are realized, only then you can be in that state.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Until then, we have to work towards that. You can't fool and cheat yourself, see? Because within your own mind, you might say something to other people, but does that person really feel that?
Mm.
No, he knows that I'm taking other people for a ride.
Right. Yes, that's right. So the more I think about this, the way you explained it, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that the both perspectives that we started off looking at, the karma, the result and action, and it's attributed to the person that's committed the action. And the second perspective is in the degrees of your realization, and as you go up that chain, that second perspective of the Bhagavad Gita becomes is the truth anyway, but that's when it becomes quite real for that realized person. In the meantime, we're all striving to get there, and therefore we're still stuck in that karma where there's an action and there's a result of an action and so on. So that's
So, yeah, you might say, why is it all this? Uh, so, if we asked, the wave asked the ocean, okay, why did you create this? A world where I have forgotten my true nature and now I'm in ignorance, and in that ignorance, I'm doing things and suffering from success and failure and all those type of things. So the ocean will say, hey, look, it's my own sweet will. Okay. And that's why it's called Leela. There's no real rationale. You cannot have a reason for it. It's a play. From that perspective, remember, not from the human perspective. And he says, since I want this play to go on, the only way I can make it happen is to bring this ignorance, because the moment people will realize the truth, then this play will stop. They will just fly away. Okay. So what he does, he hides that doership, the actual doer, and gives us a false sense of a doership, which is our ego. All right. And that ego now is, has pumping himself and wants to take all the credit and name and fame and be famous and be recognized and all those type of things. And that's how the game goes on. But when you get whacked around a little bit and understand this is so much suffering, then you turn around and say, hey, please put an end to this. And he said, okay, when his grace comes, then he shows that behind this apparent ego is a real doer who dwells within us in our own heart, so to say. And when that understanding comes up, then the binding effect of work and all those things loses its binding power, so to say. It's like a rope. When you set fire to it, it looks like a rope, but it's only a line of ashes. It cannot bind us anymore. So that's why when does this transition happen? Well, so long as the jiva is very happy with this world and is having a great time and wants to come back here and has enjoyments, sufferings and all those things, is happy, that's when the play is going on nicely. Only when one wants to become free from this cycle of what you call happiness and misery and life and death, such a person tries to find out a way. And the way is to, like in Swami Vivekananda, when he writes beautifully in Karma Yoga, he says, through the machinery itself is the way to get out of it. That means karma can have a binding effect, it can have a liberating effect. It's like a screw. When you turn it clockwise, you tighten it, and you learn to turn it anti-clockwise, you loosen it. So you have to have that knowledge which way to turn. Otherwise, sometimes you're turning left, sometimes right. And most of the people are in that way. When that knowledge comes, which is what Karma Yoga is about, then we constantly try to use karma itself. You turn the screwdriver, but you are always trying to free yourself, not to bind yourself. And
yes,
that's how you get out of it. So we will be you don't run away from work, So yes. Arjuna wanted to run away. Shri Krishna said, no, that's not going to work, You have to be in the middle, but learn the art of working. That action that will free us, not bind us. And that is what Karma Yoga is all about. And I think it's very, very powerful. But it's only useful for somebody who wants to free himself, Okay. Yeah. If somebody doesn't have that desire for freedom, well, then he says, hey, the world is wonderful. There's a few knocks and blows, but by and large, it's good. I should come maybe, in another country, another place, another form. But this world is great, Many people live under that illusion and they keep on come and get have these various experiences. But at some point, some souls, when they become like old souls, spiritually senior souls, advanced souls, they will say the pendulum of happiness and misery is not the best. What I want is peace. And that peace is at the top of the pendulum where the string is tied to the point. And that is not swinging. And that point is within us in the spiritual dimension. Not the physical dimension, not in the mental dimension, but in that highest dimension. And when we go reach that point within ourselves, then the world will still continue to swing around. But we are not part of it. We are in spectator, not affected by everything that's going around. So that's a beautiful space, and that is the idea, perfect ideal that is taught of Karma Yoga or all the yogas. Sthita Prajna, being established in the knowledge that I am not the doer, and yet let the body work, the mind works, everything, but I'm not attached to the result of any work because I know the electricity flows and the light glows. The bulb does not say, I glow because I have this power. It is aware of that invisible electricity, which is the source of that energy. Likewise, the mind glows and the body acts, but we know that there's a power that is operating through us. And we see every day when that power switches off, well, the body shuts down and the mind shuts down. And Ram Nam Sathe. We see that every day. So, how to be aware of that power that is there, and then engage with the world, because that's the whole secret. Otherwise, we are ignorant of the real force that's within us, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you, Swamiji. That was very well explained. I will, at least for me, I have a better understanding of how we can reconcile the two different perspectives. I hope the listeners have been able to follow through as well. So I think that's it for today, Swamiji. And
yes. Let us sum it up in one sentence. Yep. Okay. Apparently, we have a free will. Really, we don't.
Well done, Swamiji. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you for listening. Being in balance, rhythm. For more information, please visit www.vedanta.nz.